Well, hello, Celeste. I am so excited to welcome you to the Passionista podcast. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me. I'm incredibly excited and honored that you would ask me on. So I'm so happy.
Yes. Okay, so I cannot wait for all of the Passionistas out there to hear about who you are and what you do, because when we talk about passion, I mean, yes, Dr. Celeste, you are bringing the passion.
Yeah.
But we're talking about in the bedroom. Okay.
Yes.
So just share with everybody briefly who you are and what you do, because I love it.
Thank you. Well, so my name is Dr. Celeste Holbrook, and I'm a sexologist. My mission in life is to provide safe spaces for women to talk about sex. And that's it. That's it. I've grown a business off of creating a safe space. And it has been one of those things that has grown and amalgamated over time. But overall, it's as simple as that. We don't have enough safe spaces for this type of conversation. So I'm giving you tons of credit for creating that space too, because it means a lot. And for anybody listening, being able to talk about sex in a real, authentic, vulnerable way is incredibly important and incredibly powerful. So thank you.
Love it. And so, okay, so I know that a lot of people are probably going, okay, but like, what is a sexologist? So could you tell us a little bit about what does it mean to be a sexologist? Like you probably, I mean, I don't know, maybe you did, you don't set out saying when I grow up, I'm going to be a sexologist.
Right. I did not. That is very true. I thought I was going to be an English teacher, which did not happen.
Oh, okay. So tell us that journey. Okay. What is a sexologist? How did you get here? How did you get so passionate about this?
Yeah, so that's a really fascinating story, and I'll do the kind of short version of it. But I will tell you that I grew up in a very loving but very conservative community, a religious faith-based community, and I was always given the message that you wait until you're married to have sex, fine, whatever. But I was also, underneath those messages were layers of messages like sex is only for men, or women aren't supposed to feel pleasure or touch themselves or do things like that. And so when I did become sexually active, I ended up waiting until I was married to have sex. And I thought, I've waited. It's going to be fantastic. I'm so excited about this. And it was awful.
It was like, wah, wah.
It was terrible.
What did I wait for?
Right.
What's going on? Which I think there's so many women out there that can totally relate. So
yeah, whether you waited or not, lots of times this whole build up to what sex is, and then you get really disappointed. So sex was actually really painful for me.
Okay.
Not just in this is the first time you have sex pain, but very incredibly painful. And it didn't get better. I thought I have an old rusty vagina. I just need to have sex more.
Oh gosh. Time out. I love you just said old rusty vagina on this podcast. We're keeping it real.
I am so sorry. I'm not going to get you on the explicit list, I promise.
I know it's cool.
I know how
bring
to
it.
keep you off that list.
No, bring it. We need to challenge the old rusty vagina.
Exactly. So I mean, I was a little older when I got married, not a lot older, but I was 26 and I had never had sex before. And so I just thought that things were just needed to be loosened up. But that wasn't the case. I really did have a whole year's worth of really painful intercourse. And what happened was it started to really fray my relationship. So if you've ever been newly married or in a new relationship, things like resentment and anger and frustration are hard to work through at the beginning of a marriage. And it was starting to get to that where, my partner would initiate and I would withdraw and be like, why do you want to hurt me like that? And so it was really hard on our relationship. Not only that, but I was kind of working, I was in grad school, he was in medical school. And so it was already, we were really, really poor. It was already really, really hard. And so on top of that, we didn't have this one connective thing, to help us through. So I eventually, I went and saw my OB-GYN after about a year because I didn't know who else to go to.
Right.
And Lindsay, my OB-GYN, did a full examination. And after that examination, he basically looked at me and he said, Celeste, I think this pain is going to go away as soon as you have a kid.
Oh my.
Which was not the answer I was really hoping.
Wow. Wow. Only a male would have said that.
I mean, I didn't, you said it, not me, but
only a male would look at a woman and say that. No, thank you. No, sir.
so, like, well, pass on the kid. As a problem solver, right? Kids don't solve problems. They're
No,
lovely
they
and wonderful. I have two, but they do not solve any problems, including painful sex. But what happened was he didn't address, like, there was a lot more going on than just like, I needed to stretch my vagina out. There was now emotional things that were going on. I needed more than just physical help. I needed a lot more. So I didn't realize it, but it was that moment. That moment was the one where I decided I was going to become the professional that I needed, because there had to be somebody else besides this OB-GYN who could walk me through what it would take to get to a sex life that was connective and pleasurable for both of us.
Wow. Wow. So it was really your own struggle that propelled you into, like, I've got to have answers. I've got to have answers for my own body, for my marriage, for my life. So, okay. So what happened next?
Yeah. So I was already in grad school and I was studying behavior already. So I just started studying sexual behavior as a matter of course. And I really just was able to fix my own sex life by my own self-exploration and my own education. And eventually over time, I worked myself through the pain and through the hard conversations that we needed to have. And really a lot of my own limiting beliefs about what sex should feel like and look like for me as a female. And when I got to the other side of it, it was so good and so powerful in my life that I was like, there's got to be a way I can teach other women to go through this process of sexual renovation for whatever they're going through: painful intercourse, low libido, shame around their sex life, whatever it is. This is a process I can teach to other people and replicate. So so that's kind of what I did. I worked at a sex toy company for about 2 years and was in the industry for a while, which is really helpful and interesting.
I bet.
Then I got pregnant with the twins and had a C-section, so that wouldn't have ever helped anyway.
Oh, touche. Yes. What now?
So yeah, so I had the twins and then decided I wanted to come home from a corporate job, and so I started my own practice about 6 years ago, and it's been crazy ever since and good.
Wow. Well, okay, so let's back up for just a minute because I want to talk about two things. Okay. I want to talk about what were your limiting beliefs that you had to overcome. What were some of the things you had to let go of and kind of relearn in your own discovery? So I definitely want to talk about that. And then I also want to talk about you leaving corporate world to launch out on your own, because that's a big step. And so, okay, so let's back up. Limiting beliefs. What were the major ones that you had to let go of and overcome, and what were they?
Yeah. So one of the big ones was that I was not worthy of time and attention in sex. I kind of had this underlying belief that I was kind of there to provide a good sex life or provide pleasure, which I believe is, somewhat of a role that both partners play. But I really needed to understand that I was in charge of my own pleasure and that I was worthy of the time it took to get aroused. Because I needed a lot more time than my partner did in order for my body to be ready for sex. And so once I understood that and took the time that I needed to get fully aroused, then sex got a lot better. So that was one of the limiting beliefs I had. Another one that I had was that I needed to look or be or sound certain ways because of all the sex that we see on TV or pornography or whatever. We are kind of conditioned to think that sex should look a certain way or sound a certain way. And so I thought if I wasn't being this, super vixen that, loved anal play or, and squirted everywhere, that something was wrong with me. And that just wasn't the case. Like, I needed to figure out what I wanted and what we wanted as a partnership. And that was really all that mattered, whether it looked like that. And sometimes it did, and whether it didn't. And a lot of times it didn't. And that was okay.
Right. Okay. And I think, like, for women, I think especially women in conservative communities that maybe have been raised in the church, the whole purity movement, I really feel like there can be a lot of shame around sex, a lot of miseducation or just no education at all. Like, I can remember growing up, like hearing all those same messages that you did. Like you basically, you're waiting to get married because, you know, you're a whore.
Right. If you don't, right.
If you don't, you know, that you're there to please your husband, to meet someone else's needs. And it doesn't matter basically like what you need, or, you know, what turns you on. And in fact, if things turn you on, then you're a whore, you know, so there's all of, yeah. So it's like, but wait a minute, but then I'm supposed to be one kind of in the, you know, it's like all of these messages are so confusing. And I think the enemy uses so many things to distort something that is so beautiful. I mean, sex is a gift. I believe it's a gift from God. And, you know, like the enemy does to everything, he distorts what is meant to be beautiful and was meant to be a gift. And I think there's so many shaming messages and so many confusing messages. And like this, I wish that someone would have told me, like, you are waiting for marriage because it is amazing.
Right.
Like sex is awesome. It's going to feel great. You're, you know, like, you know what I'm saying? Like, it's not just about you meeting someone else. Like it's so incredible that you want to wait to experience that with the person you want to be with forever, you know, not just don't have sex because you don't want to get pregnant.
Because you will be tarnished or you will be like less than, you know? Yeah. And I think it's a fine line because I still do like the idea of that sex is this, you know, you talk about it being awesome. But I think beyond that, sex is incredibly powerful. And in my opinion, that's a reason to wield that power. It was in Spider-Man, with great power comes great responsibility.
That's right.
I mean, yeah. If you think about sex sells cars, it sells hamburgers, you know, like they use sex to sell Drano. If you've ever seen the double penetration commercial for Drano. I mean, it brings countries together. Sex literally creates life. So sex is incredibly powerful. And with that idea, I think is why it's used. You know, you talk about the enemy using it. I think that's why it's used so much to be distorted, especially towards women, because it is incredibly powerful. And so what I want for women is for them to understand the power of sex in their own life and how it can be the super fuel for not only your partnership, but for, you know, for your work, for your entrepreneurial business, for your volunteer roles, for your mission, whatever it is. Sex can be that powerful thing, because I believe if you can ask and understand for what you need and want and desire in your most vulnerable space, where you are raw and, you know, literally naked with somebody, if you can have your power there, if you can ask for what you want and get for what you want, girl, you got it in the boardroom. You can ask for what you want.
That's right. Right? Oh my gosh, I never thought about that. And I think, like, you know, that's not an issue that men have at all. You know, they've been given that freedom to ask for what they want. And, you know, we say all these things, which I don't even want to get on this tangent, like boys will be boys. You know? Well, I'm like,
not in my house.
You know, no, I'm like, what does that even mean? You know, but I mean, I'm just like, are you kidding me? It's like women have been either over sexualized or desexualized, you know?
Right.
So I love what you said. That's so true. I mean, and like for me, my love language is physical touch.
Yeah.
And I would totally agree with that. You know, it's like when my love tank is full in that area, and I mean like with sex, I'm not just talking about holding hands.
Right.
Okay. Like in my like I do, like it's because it's meant to be that. I feel like that's how God has created it for you. It's a need that you get to share, just like you said, in your most vulnerable state. So, okay. So what would you tell women? Because I hear this a lot, okay, and I know there can be so many different things that attribute to this, but maybe physical touch in general is not their primary love language, which I get, you know, but there are women that would say, and might be listening today, that are like, I hate sex. I hate sex. Don't touch me, like gross. I hate it. Right. What would you say? If you can even answer that. I know that's kind of a blanket question, but where would you start? Where would you start?
Right. So if she was sitting in my office, I would ask her a bunch of follow-up questions. But the main thing that I want you to think about, if you're listening right now and you're going, oh my gosh, that's me. I hate sex. I could never have sex for the rest of my life and be totally okay. I want you to hear me say this. The biggest killer of arousal is responsibility. Okay. The biggest killer of arousal is responsibility. And typically women hold more responsibility, emotional, responsibility and physical responsibility in the household. And so,
wow. Okay, here we go. I'm tracking with you. Okay.
Right. And so think about how your responsibilities are interfering with your ability to get aroused. So if you're laying in bed and you have a whole pile of laundry that supposedly is your responsibility, and you have your work computer files and you have like kids in the monitor, like, of course you're not going to be able to be vulnerable enough to get aroused and sexual, right? Like that's a given. That's why hotel sex is so good, because you're so freaking far away from all of
out.
Yeah. Yes, exactly.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay, but like, what would you say though? Because the ladies that are listening are going, okay, but I still have laundry.
I get it, but I still got to do the laundry. So several things I want to talk about in a second, but first of all, ask for help. Okay. Like, get help. Like, this is one thing this is why the greatest sex toy is watching your partner vacuum. Right? Like seeing them, take some responsibility for things that are normally on your plate. That can be really, really helpful. Or speak it out. Sometimes you just need to be heard and seen, especially if your love language is words of affirmation. You need to be seen for what you're doing. And then the second thing is, the world never tells us that there are two different types of arousal. And so the first type of arousal is spontaneous arousal, meaning I am just like watching a baseball game and I, see my wife looking hot. And so I get aroused. And so then I seek out sexual behavior later on. That's spontaneous arousal. So that's how we kind of normally think arousal works.
Like stimulus response.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, exactly. But there's a whole other half of the population, and it's not separated by women or men, but a whole half of the population that experiences responsive arousal, meaning sexual behavior must begin before I start to feel aroused.
Right.
So if you feel like you never out of the blue want to have sex again, you're probably right. You probably need to engage in some sort of sexual behavior before your arousal will begin. And that's a totally okay type of arousal. But in the movies and in pornography and in everything that you visualize, you basically only see one type of arousal. And that is the spontaneous, like, throw you up against the wall. I feel horny, so I throw her up against the wall kind of arousal. And there's just more to it than that.
Wow, that is so good. So I just feel like there's so much freedom in that statement. Number one, for men and women, but my podcast is primarily women, is that, like, stop beating yourself up because you're not wanting spontaneous, just give it to me, baby sex all the time. And then the other side of that is, and you correct me if I'm wrong here, is, to don't just write yourself off either and say, I hate sex or I don't want to have sex. Sometimes you just need to get into it and get aroused.
Yes, exactly.
To get it going, get it fueled. It's like a car has got to have gasoline in it to ride. That's a horrible analogy.
I love it. It's perfect.
But it's like, you just got to get in it,
You have to start and be okay with starting before you're necessarily aroused. Now, don't hear me wrong. I never want any woman to do something she doesn't want to do.
Right.
But if you want to feel aroused, but just don't, start sexual behavior before. Now, again, those are some simple, that's like the soundbite, suggestions, but also, what are those limiting beliefs you still believe in? Those are probably impacting your arousal. How do you feel about sex? Do you know what you like? Are you putting your pleasure in somebody else's responsibility load? Do you know how to touch yourself? Do you know what you like? Do you know how to ask for what you want? All of those things can impact your arousal too, because if you're never getting what you like because you don't know, then of course you're not going to want sex, So it's multifaceted.
Yeah, I
So,
get it. Okay. Wow. That was so good. There's so much in that. Okay. So let's now jump to your story.
mm,
You are in corporate world and you
mhm.
decide you're going to go into your own coaching practice. Okay. So tell us about that journey, because that is also a big, that's a big step. So I guess, do you have like a final straw or like a moment where you're like, I'm doing this, or were you just like, yeah, I got this, I'm going to do
No, that's not what happened. um, like I'm highly skilled at doubting myself.
it?
So, so
Okay.
it wasn't just like a jump into it, but I had the twins, and when they were about a year old, and I knew that I couldn't keep the corporate job
Mhm.
and pay for childcare for 2 infants. So I was like, well, just stay home. It's cheaper for us to do it that way.
Mhm.
And so after about a year, I really wanted to talk to some adults. And I was like, what can I do to be able to talk to some adults? I had finished my PhD. Can I do to talk to some adults? But I want to do it in my own time frame, like I want to make my schedule. And so I thought, you know what? I have all this knowledge about sex and sexuality. Like I could, help other people through this process. So it was really like a ragtag operation at first. I was
Yeah.
renting an office from a therapist just on 1 day a week, and really trying to figure out marketing on my own, trying to get referrals from OB-GYNs and other therapists and things like that. So I mean, it was rough at first, and it was just kind of something that I did to pay the babysitter.
Right.
At first, it was never really like I didn't just put a sign up and all of a sudden it's a whole career.
Yeah.
So I've built it over time, and now I have my own beautiful office,
Yes.
which is great. And I've just learned a lot over time. But if I could go back 6 years ago and like apologize to my first few clients, I probably would, because you're just learning and you're just figuring
You're
it out.
just starting. You just started. Start
Yeah.
small and keep going and figure it out. And like, it doesn't have to be perfect to be wonderful, but you just keep going.
Yeah. And I just loved it. Like I would go home and I'd be like, Nate, I taught a woman how to have her first orgasm. She had her first orgasm last week and she came in to tell me, and it was like, it's like the coolest thing ever. Or I had a client towards the beginning that had really painful intercourse and been married for 8 years, but wanted to try and get pregnant. And like I worked her through that painful intercourse process where she was having pain-free intercourse, and then she got pregnant like 3 months later. And like, those are the moments you're like,
yes,
damn, I'm onto something. Like, this is so fun.
yes. Man, Celeste, I just love that so much, because like, man, gosh, I mean, you took your struggle, like who would have known? Okay. And I think so many people are like, I don't know what I'm passionate about. I'm stuck, confused. But it's like, okay, you took your struggle. If you wouldn't have like persevered through that and decided like, I'm going to find an answer here, I'm going to find a solution. What started out as your struggle with painful intercourse and not being able to get help, and seeing that there was a major problem for you and tons of other women, led you to your passion. And it wasn't an overnight deal. You had, the corporate job, marriage, navigating marriage, twins, hello. Like,
Right.
I think so many people are just thinking that getting connected to what they're passionate about and then actually walking it out and making it like a reality, their baby dream, like making it a full grown reality, is just going to be like this boom overnight thing. Or like the clouds are going to part and a voice from heaven is going to be like, this is what you're supposed to do. And then boom, they'll immediately be doing it. Now, I'm not saying that doesn't happen. It for sure does. But what I have found through interview after interview is that it is a journey. It's a wilderness deal. And one thing is true, and I think I've said this on maybe 3 other podcasts up to this point already, is that the women who are making their passion a reality, they're living out their passion, fully connected to it, a daily reality, they just keep showing up.
Yeah. Yeah.
They just keep showing up, you know? like each step at a time. Like there's no magic secret. There's no like, you know, again, like fairy dust or clouds part. What, like you just keep showing up.
Yeah.
Because if you're truly passionate about it, you will. And it won't be, I have to. It won't be, oh my gosh. It's like, no, I get to, and I love that. Yeah. And I just think that you turning that struggle into a solution, and then that solution into a passion, is impacting so many lives. And I feel like we need more. We need women to be free in this area, not repressed, to be joyful in this area, and for us to unlearn all of the shaming and to have wholeness and healing. So, okay, Dr. Celeste. So tell us a little bit about, I know you work with women and you work with couples, correct? And you also go and speak to organizations and churches.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. So do you have any, if you can share, do you have any, like, I mean, I'm just like, how courageous, right? Like you rolling up into a church, you know, just about to talk about a topic that probably is making everyone cringe, is making everyone like look around, like, you know, I don't know. So do you have any like stories about speaking about sex in churches, which I feel like is part of the problem, is that we're just not open and talking about it enough. So, okay. So tell me.
Yes. Okay. So, I will tell you that I thought that I would have more pushback than I ever get. Now, I know how to navigate hard conversations. It's part of my training. You know, I know how to have a conversation with a pastor who's a little bit like, I'm not sure, you know, we can use the word sensuality instead of sex, you know, for this presentation if you want, or whatever. Like, I know how to navigate those things. I'm totally cool with that. I'll meet you where you are, bro. But, I really do not get as much pushback as you would think one would, you know, saying things like clitoris and erection from the pulpit.
Did you say rusty old vagina?
Sometimes I do. Sometimes I actually do. Yes. Depends on the church congregation, but sometimes you know, and I realize that I can get away with this. I don't know if I'm getting away with anything, but everybody's having sex. Like 99% of the world has sex at least once. And so everybody is like just sitting there, like absorbing this information. Like, thank goodness somebody's willing to say the things that need to be said. So I find very little pushback from like church groups or conservative groups. And even, you know, I have a fairly liberal stance on almost everything. And even when somebody disagrees with my liberal stance, like, oh, that's cool. We can have like that kind of conversation.
Yes.
About, right?
Gosh, it's like, I don't need you to, I mean, it's like, can we just like honor each other even if we disagree?
Exactly.
That's what we need more of.
I've always gone into these harder discussions with the mindset that I am not here to change anybody's mind. My only job in these hard conversations is to be a voice for marginalized people. So, and you can probably guess how those conversations are, what those conversations are about. But for the most part, I don't get hardly any pushback. Maybe I won't be invited back. Maybe that's, but,
wow.
But I don't get very much pushback because I feel like people, and you know, I'm a practicing Christian. I feel like people in faith-based institutions are just searching for ways to play sexuality because we don't have the opportunity not to talk about sex anymore because it is everywhere, right? Yep. And when we use entertainment for education, things get really, really messed up. Yep. And so we just don't have the opportunity to not talk about it like we did in the 50s when people were on TV sleeping in separate twin beds. I mean, you know, like your kids
we should be the leading voice, the most open.
Thank you, Lindsay.
The most open, the most vulnerable, the most like non-shaming, non-judgmental. Like that's the issue, you know, is when the church chooses shame and chooses to keep things under the rug or in the closet. I mean, it's just like,
it just goes dark.
It does. It goes dark. We should be the leading voice in everything. I agree with that as well. You know, it's like, instead of looking at other things, we are.
we should provide that really holistic education about sex, that it's not just about reproduction, because guess what, 97% of the sex we're having is not to make babies, it's for pleasure.
No,
But yet
exactly.
we teach on this kind of reproduction model, this is how babies are made. Yeah, well, sometimes, but
Mhm.
this is also how we are connected. So yeah, I just think, I'm a practicing Adventist, and I don't know if how familiar you are with Adventism, but we have kind of this health message, and a lot of Adventists are vegetarian, and I happen to be a vegetarian too. So my goal is, when I come and speak to Adventist churches, are, in 20 years, I hope that instead of, when I say, oh yeah, I'm a Seventh-day Adventist, somebody says, oh, are you a vegetarian? I hope that in 20 years, our health message is so holistic and so good that
Mhm.
they say, oh, you're an Adventist? You must be really great at sex.
I love it.
I
Yes.
know.
Yes. Well, I
Um,
mean, it's like I always say too, it's like, okay, listen, women of God, here's what I believe. I believe we're created to be the most passionate, the most confident, the most loving, the most fully alive, vivacious, sexy,
yeah,
like women on the planet. That's how we're
yes,
created. That's our
right,
original design.
right.
It's not about being perfect. It's not about being some standard that somebody
Mm,
else has set. Like, you in your own skin with your own unique gifts and capability and calling, like that, we're meant to set the standard, and to be
totally,
real with that. So I love all of that so much.
totally.
Okay, so tell the listeners now, like, what you've got going on, because I know you've got something really, really special that you are launching. So tell us about that.
Yes, thank you so much for asking. So I do virtual consults through Zoom. So I have clients everywhere. Um, and I do the speaking and things, but my passion is education. I'm an
Mhm.
educator, kind of from the very beginning. And so I have created an online course that takes women through the 4-step process of sexual renovation. So awareness, deconstruction, where we kind of deconstruct those limiting beliefs,
So good.
vulnerability, learning how to become
Yeah.
vulnerable and explore your body and your sexuality. And then
Mhm.
resilience is that 4th step that we get to. So I take women through this 4-step process of sexual renovation through this
Mhm.
new online course that I have developed called Elevate. And so it's specifically targeted to women who are maybe experiencing low libido,
Yeah.
painful intercourse, sexual shame, or just generally like not happy with your sex life. And I love the online format because you can do it at your own pace, in your own home. You don't have to sit here and talk to me and be vulnerable if you don't
Mhm.
want to. But I do read your journal responses. So you still get
Mhm.
personal feedback from me, but it's maybe not quite so, personal. Uh,
Right.
it's personalized, but not personal, if that makes any sense.
Mhm.
So that's what I'm really excited about, and I can leave you a link for that for your listeners to, kind
Mhm.
of understand what that's about. But that's my online course, Elevate. I'm really super excited about it, and I've had some really good feedback about it already. So
Oh man, I want to take it. I mean,
yeah,
I feel like
come on.
everybody should. I'm like, because I just truly believe, Celeste, is that, gosh, I mean, this is just such a big piece of who we are. And, one of the things that I do is help women discover what they're passionate about and then make it a reality to live
Yeah.
fully connected to it. And I mean, I don't know, I'm not the doctor, you're the doctor, but I mean, I could be totally wrong. Like, I don't feel like we're living fully if we're not accessed in a healthy, whole way
Right.
to a huge, powerful part of how God made us.
Right.
I mean, am I wrong? I mean, now, do I
I
feel like sex controls our life? No.
know.
But you're crazy. I mean, I'm like, it's silly to think that this is not as powerful
Yes.
as it's meant to be. Its original design is a gift for
Yeah.
us.
It's a gift, and in a way, I've always felt like sex is incredibly holy, and if our bodies are
Yeah.
temples, it is worship. I mean,
Yes.
it is a form of worship to me, when like experiencing pleasure
Mhm.
is a form of saying thank you, right?
Yes.
And I just when one experiences that, and when I see women like have that spark of realization that sex is for me and created, in my for my pleasure and for my life, and really letting go, lovingly releasing all those ideas of what she thought sex should have been. Like that's that new realization that's so, so wonderful and keeps me doing what I'm doing. And I'm sure you get that too. When you are working with women and you find that spark and you're like, that's the moment where they're never going to go backwards. They're never going to go back to thinking about it in a different way.
So, so good.
It's addicting.
So good. And would you also recommend, if anyone is going, really, you know, I'm just like, read Song of Songs, read that. I mean, it's like, you can't deny that this is meant to be worship. It's meant to be a gift. Like, there ain't no talk about having babies up in that, up in that thing. You know, it's like we throwing down, you know. So.
Yeah. And that's a lot of, when I go speak to faith-based institutions, I really took Song of Solomon because I wanted to find what the best practices were for sex. We use the Bible as a best practice for a whole bunch of other things. Like, we should use the Bible as a best practice for sex. And Song of Solomon knocks everything out of the park. Like, it talks about the physical aspects of sex, the safety aspects of sex, the love, the belonging, the sexual worth, the sexual actualization. All of it is in there in Song of Solomon in different ways. And that's the pyramid by which we build a good sex life, starting with the physical stuff and then safety, belonging, consent, all of those things. That's how we stack it up. And it's all in there in Song of Solomon as a best practice for us to understand. So you're totally right. You're totally right.
So good. So good. Okay. Well, Dr. Celeste, thank you so much for coming on. So just honored to have you here. Listeners, listen, get connected with her on social media. We're going to put all of the links in the show notes to how you can get in touch with Dr. Celeste. If you have an old rusty vagina that needs some help. I think we've said that like 10 times now.
I love it.
What can we call that? ORV. What is it? ORV. Yeah.
Old rusty.
If you got a case of ORV, hey, I think you need to use that for marketing.
I'm totally using it. Thank you, Lindsay.
Use it. Go get her course, Elevate, and like elevate that ORV. So, okay. Thank you so much, Celeste.
Thank you. It's been such a pleasure and an honor. Thank you very much.
You're so welcome.